I have been privileged at CNA to be part of the process of creating the military advisory boards. In 2006, the first board convened and made its report in 2007. The second one convened in 2008 and made a report in May of 2009. The military advisory boards were formed, as Phyllis said, to provide our perspective as graduates of the military system, people who devoted their adult lives for the most part to serving our nation and to leading sailors and Marines and soldiers and airmen. Here are some of the names. The commander of the U.S. European Command, the commander of the Pacific Command, and former ambassador to China, the director of naval research, an acquisition professional. We could talk about each of these people in some detail, but over the course of the last 4 years, some 15 3- and 4-star flag officers have been involved in examining the issues, first with regard to climate, its changing, and the modifications that we see taking place to the planet, and what are the implications of those to military planners and people who ultimately may have to execute on behalf of the United States under new conditions. And then we looked at energy, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea here is that these are an interconnected set of issues: climate change, energy dependence, and national security. How about the climate? Well, there is a wide variety of viewpoints in our country about the validity of the science with regard to, first, what the degree of change is, and second, whether it's a normal cyclical process, and third, whether there's a large human contribution or not. We heard the evidence, we made our own decisions, but collectively the group said that the world, our planet, is changing. And that very fact, whatever the cause, means that we have to be prepared to deal with it. And as military leaders, our advice to the Pentagon is to do some of the things that Phyllis indicated have actually taken place in the last couple of years. So we looked at the trends, we looked at the conditions that have resulted from some of those trends, the situation that pertains today. What would the impacts likely to be? What are they on resources? What are they on the conditions in which young men and women have to go and represent us in difficult places? What kind of planning can make it easier for our military of the future to do the job we all want? And is there a tie to national security? And if that's the case, then how should the national security apparatus respond to all of that? So a couple of quick view graphs that you may have seen snippets of elsewhere, but here are a couple of shots taken from space, not far apart, a couple of years apart, and they show in the part of the year where the ice is undergoing its greatest retreat, September. It shows the shrinkage of the polar ice cap. Day before yesterday, the Russian state-owned transportation shipping line declared that it was going to reinforce the bows of some tankers so that they could use this route and make direct deliveries of fuel oil from the northern part of Russia to Japan. My personal view is that it's going to be a while before there is a regular, reliable route, a commercially useful route in the Arctic, but that won't stop the nations that are interested or want to make a claim from moving forward repeatedly as the ice continues to withdraw. Is there certainty about those things I mentioned before, the various aspects of the science, the contribution of humans to whatever is changing on the planet? Well, maybe not, but Gordon Sullivan, General Gordon Sullivan, the former Chief of Staff of the Army, who led the first of these military advisory boards, said, by the time you're certain something bad has happened on the battlefield. And so It is the training, it's the charge of senior military people, senior folks in the defense establishment, to be prepared to deal with the relative risks of this or that course of action. And that's what we advised. That's an interesting thing. So he said, we never have 100% certainty, and it's up to us to make sure that we weigh the risks and we judge the courses of action. We're sure that the most troubled areas of the world, those that are already the most stressed, will be more stressed in the future. People say, well, migrations have happened before, and changes in weather patterns and in climatology have changed in the past. But the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, this will resonate, I think, with you. There were 2 billion people on this planet when I was born. If I'm lucky to stick around a little longer, there'll be 8 billion when I die. Half of all the people who ever lived on this planet live today. And so there is a profound level of pressure on our planet that's never been felt before. So migrations have never occurred under these conditions. The kinds of stresses that have been imposed on people because of changes in the place they live, in agriculture, in water availability, those sorts of pressures have never existed before. And we believe that the changes that are underway that we witness every day will result in aggravation of these problems. Water, food, health, and weather are all factors that are undergoing profound changes. Many of those come to roost together in one place. Darfur is arguably a place where drought, the migration and collision of farmers with herders has contributed largely to the problems that are being experienced there. It's not only the fact that water, in parts of the world there will be too much water, and in parts there will be too little. It's increasingly that way now. And with water often goes the kind of animal life on which people exist, fish in this case. And it puts people in the conditions that we see on CNN and the ones that tear at our heartstrings when we see people who've been subjected to these difficult circumstances and live in places like this. And these are breeding grounds for Al-Qaeda and other organizations which have our worst interests at heart. And these are the products very often in our military judgment of those kinds of conditions. So the findings from this first study, climate change, the changes that we see taking place in the world constitute a serious threat to our national security, and that in those areas of the world where stresses are already evident, it can only get worse as a result of this. Tensions, even in stable areas of the world, are likely to increase. And, as I said earlier, energy dependence, national security, and climate change are all interrelated. So we went into the second military advisory board, essentially the same membership, a little bit of change here and there. And we asked these questions. How about energy? Is there a direct energy or a direct national security implication related to our energy dependence? And if there is, then what's the appropriate role for the Department of Defense and other elements of the national security apparatus, state and others, in dealing with this? Well, our energy posture is a threat. This is a serious and urgent problem in a national security context as well as in areas like economics, and we've talked about that earlier. Militarily, diplomatically, and economically, this is a huge factor. It undermines our national security. It reduces our options. We don't have the leverage we would like to in the diplomatic world, and we don't have the range of alternatives we'd like to exercise in supporting the interests of the United States, because it cripples our foreign policy and because it damages our economic welfare, and we don't have the resources we would like otherwise to invest in ways that are in the interest of the United States. The huge price tag this exacts is a principal factor there. And it gets us involved, keeps us involved with people who don't have our best interests at heart, and frankly, in my personal case, with whom you'd like to hold your nose often when you deal with them. And it undermines, as I said, the economic stability. So we think that there's an unacceptably high national security specific implication for the way we are managing our energy affairs. We don't know for sure how much of each kind of resource is available on the planet, but we know for darn sure that it's limited. We know there will never be any more of the kinds of resources that we're increasingly stressing in the way we live our lives and the way we conduct our trade and the way we operate our country. And conflict over fuel resources is, in my view, inevitable and will increase. And the destabilization is going to be aggravated by the climate change that we see. And here are, with the exception of North America and a rapidly depleting field in the North Sea, north of Britain and west of Norway, these circles represent the places where we draw our principal non-U.S. Energy from. And you can see that those are areas which are already under stress, already having difficulty with governance and governments providing services to their people. This is in the Niger Delta. These are the shots in the same place. There's a very modern storage facility up on the left-hand view graph. On the one side of the Niger River and on the other side is this extraordinary poverty. And places like this can be powder kegs and lead to the kind of guerrilla activity that's represented on the lower right. This is a chart that gets the attention of every operational commander in today's military world. That's a convoy snaking around a one-lane dirt road in northeastern Afghanistan. And as a military person, I'd much rather attack that convoy than defend it. But that's what our young men and women have to do. They defend convoys that look like that. 70% of what those convoys carry is liquid, and 80% of what that liquid is petroleum. And our young men and women have no riskier engagement right now in the world than convoy escort, and as a matter of fact, Operation Free has some people here who have been personally involved in that. This picture was taken from about a mile away in a helicopter, and you could see how vulnerable the elements of that convoy are. And then in our own country, as a national security matter, the fragility of the grid is important. Remember the breakdown in 2004 that started in Ohio and darkened 30 million homes in the United States? Well, that was a very small tick that was unprepared for on a electric grid that is managed by about 6,000 power companies in the United States. And so we have to get that under control in order in our future to be able to get the power from where we can generate it, renewables, where we can generate it, to places where it's needed. So we have some findings here. National security planning process up until May of 2009 had not been, in our view, sufficiently responsive to the new conditions that it was facing. A second finding, we needed concerted leadership and continuous commitment and the kind of leadership in the United States that needed to emerge to seize this problem by the throat, and then by the United States in the international community to provide the leadership that only we can. There are things the DoD can do because of its enormous buying power that were beginning to be thought of in the spring of last year, and that is writing specifications for fleet vehicles, of which the Defense Department buys a grunch. And so there are lots of things that DoD can do that will contribute to an improvement in the civilian economy, as well as making sure that military leaders are better stewards of the energy they have to consume, as well as providing technological solutions to others. So there's a roadmap here. We need to do better planning. We need to factor energy, environment into everything we do in planning. We need to deploy systems that reduce the burden of inefficient fuel usage and in a fairly direct way reduce the exposure of men and women on the front line to the kind of hazards that we are subjecting them to today. Knowing your carbon bootprint is our shorthand for this sort of awareness. We need to transform installations, the places where the military launches from need to be managed in a way that they are both more economical and set the standard for other installations of their kind that are not in the military. We need to directly expand the renewable energy use, and we need to shift to low carbon fuels wherever possible. Priority was get this into the defense planning process. Do what Phyllis said has now been done with the Quadrennial Defense Review. Own up to this problem and factor it into the long-range military planning. It isn't easy. It's not going to be simple, and we think, though, that like astronaut Dick Truly said, it's a way that the U.S. Defense Department can do a better job for the people of America and help lead the way into a technological revolution. That, with leadership at the national level, I believe, will put us in a position to be the instrumental power for the challenge of the 21st century, as we were in the last. There's our little planet, way off in the distance. And as Admiral John Nathman, my friend, said, effectively, we're Americans, for goodness sake. Let's get this done. That's all I have. Thank you. So today at lunch, I met an extraordinary gentleman. I was going to say that Mayor Hayes has been my friend since noon. But I looked pretty carefully at the listing for agenda items, and I saw I get to introduce Mayor Hayes, probably to a lot of people who know Mayor Hayes very well. But so over the course of the afternoon, I got to know a little bit more about Mayor Hayes. I was struck when he made his remarks at the lunch this noon by how great his reach is and how extraordinary his vision is with regard to the role that municipalities can play and the important functions that mayors have in making this work. And in fact, he has been instrumental in an international consortium of mayors. And, you know, I'm an acronym guy, Mayor, but I don't know what that acronym meant. We can make him explain. A native of North Little Rock, a graduate of the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, political science undergraduate, law degree, practicing attorney until first elected mayor of North Little Rock in '88. He's in his 5th term, and he has found the time to do an extraordinary number of other things that facilitate the interconnectedness of the people on the ground who execute America's policy on behalf of us who live in the cities and deal with the tussles every day. And as Senator Warner says about elected officials at the mayoral level, that they can't escape. And I think that Mayor Hayes is probably someone who experiences that but appears to thrive on it at the same time. So, Mayor Patrick Hayes, Your Honor.
When I first met my long and illustrious friend from noon today, introduced myself as a fellow admiral, self-proclaimed for the North Little Rock Navy. Just a second ago, although I didn't know his many jobs when he was on active duty, it did perk my ears when it said anti-submarine. The Razorback was always saved. It is a pleasure, certainly, to be with Senator Warner and David Pryor, who I get a chance to introduce in just a second. But I started out some comments this morning when I spoke to a group of folks that are involved in a chamber public activity group, and my first statement was, save the country, ride a bus. And I guess I'll maybe start my comments now about us and about what we as mayors do. And let me first of all introduce that acronym. It's ICLEI, which is an organization formed in 1990, the International Coalition for Local Environmental Initiatives. It's about 12 or 1,300 local governments on a global basis. The U.S. has 625 as of yesterday, and I was on the board and last year selected as the president and chairman of the board. Had an opportunity to involve a group of local officials in going to Copenhagen for the COP15, looking forward to Mexico for COP16, and trying to, and in fact, Senator tried to use, and so far I think it's worked a little bit, a bit of an Arkansas backdoor with our former First Lady as Secretary of State to raise the voice of local government in terms of international negotiations, recognizing that for the first time in the globe, in the last several years, over 50% of the world's population now live in urban areas and cities. In this country, well over 80% of the globe live, or excuse me, of the U.S. live in cities. Over 90%, perhaps right at the 95% level of the economic engines of this country are within city limits boundaries. So when you look at, and then recall, obviously, I know we're talking on a national basis in terms of our defense, and that's maybe the key, but what I'm here to do is to introduce you to Battlefield North Little Rock. And literally, I think what we're going to have to do, and I want to acknowledge Terry Kissinger and Mike Russ, two of the folks from our electric department. I see Terry, and I guess Mike is here, who's the manager of our electric department, who have been really instrumental in helping us forge our battle plan, if you want to put it that way. And when I come back to say take a bus and fight terrorism, I'm really serious about that because of the opportunities that we have to literally be energy independent. And it's going to take the battle is as much, in fact, the total battle is for our minds. And I'm a firm believer that we will be able to literally have a better quality of life in this country if we are able to move in a direction of energy independence, if we're able to move in a direction of sustainability with regard to our cities. North Little Rock is 54, I believe, 0.6. That number appears on the slide just a little bit later. But I wanted to show it in that way to underline how we are indeed a part of the globe, and that part are many parts throughout the world when it comes to cities. And if things are going to happen, they're going to happen within the borders of city limits. Which one do you push, Admiral? Okay. We talked about a boot. Admiral Gunn talked about a boot. Well, that's the way that our country has been in terms of energy. We have heard the often quoted percentage that we are less than 5% of the world's population, but we consume over 25% of the world's energy. With the rise of China and India in terms of numbers, because the population numbers that the Admiral referred to are indeed true, and we're going to find out a little bit more toward reality what the numbers are in our country. Next year, after April 1st this year, our 10-year census should reflect somewhere around 307, 308 million people, with going up to that 500 million number sometime maybe around the middle part of the century. And there's absolutely no way that we can continue living the way we have with those kinds of stresses on our environment without us changing. I refer to back to the future. Now, I'm going to go quick because you're not here to hear me necessarily, because Senator Warner and Senator Pryor are going to follow, so I'm going to be real quick. We can absolutely have a better quality of life, and we can shepherd our resources if we just start making some smart choices. And on the left, you see a stressed out young fellow trying to work a video machine. I don't know if you can see all the fast food on the couch. Our current First Lady is working very strongly on childhood obesity, and those two folks at the left are not telling each other how much they love each other, I can assure you. And you look to the right, you see outdoors, you see a family on the front porch, and I could go on about things that we've done away with front porches. They're just decoration in many instances, but I think they ought to come back. Sidewalks ought to come back. Athletics ought to come back more. I mean, there's so many things that are interwoven about what's going to make us better folks, a better country, and I think we all know we won the Cold War because of our economy. We won the Cold War because of American ingenuity and because of our opportunity to create the most economic, dynamic engine that the world has ever seen. Transportation. Now, where are we going? You all know that we worked for a while to put bus racks on the front of buses, our trolley system. We get a little criticism for that, but that's going to be much more than a tourist draw, which to a large degree it is, but it's also economic investment and job production. Many of you know what North Little Rock looks like. We just opened a brand new grocery store in the Argenta market is now open, and sales tax is being generated therefrom, and we invite you to come over very often. You can get on the trolley and be there in a very environmentally friendly way. The river transportation, more and more we're going to have to look to how to integrate when those additional people start showing up. We do complain about congestion, but we're going to have to really look at how we can live closer to our work. We can take public transit, we can use the waterways, we can use the railways, not only for freight but passenger, and that's a real strong part of North Little Rock's economy. Living. We've got downtown those townhouses over there, and admittedly there are about 13, 14 of them, and we've got 5 that have been sold, and we just sold one last week. The economy was a bit of a downturn, but the enclave over there that has 260 units, used to be Jackson Cookie Company, that's virtually full. And those folks are about as strategically located as they could for anybody that's employed downtown, with walking over the Junction Bridge. Our senior center, I know Senator Pryor, in my introduction, I'm going to refer to his activity and how much better he's made the lives of the seniors of this country. But that senior center has got an average daily attendance of over 700, and we don't know another one that even approaches that on a national basis. Come on over to Dickey Stevens after we end here. The boys of summer are back in town, and it's a downtown ballpark, as we know. And it's walking distance to our main street. You look at, the trails, talk about health and activity and choice. Because more and more we're looking at different options other than the single passenger automobile, to get back and forth. And I came over here in a single passenger automobile, but it's a Honda Civic Hybrid, and I get 40 miles to the gallon for it. And so that's what we want to do for health and for actual transportation and certainly recreation. That's what communities of the future are going to have. Now you look at the left, and we receive about 15 to 20% of our power from hydro, and we made that decision before global warming and energy independence was as much of an agenda item as it is now, but it certainly is paying dividends for us. About as clean a generating system as you can. You see the trash over to the right. We've got a partnership with Waste Management. We have 4 to 5 megawatts that we get out of burning that methane, and it's a great way to help utilize that type of a fuel and to generate clean power. You see something that we're not as excited about in terms of energy conservation, but we're 10% owner of Plum Point, and that's that coal-fired plant down there. We have, I can certainly say this, the cleanest coal plant that's going to be around, and technology, we have got to face up to realities as we look at our energy plan, because over half of our energy is supplied by coal, and there's not going to be a quick transition. So R&D needs to happen, and it needs to happen in a very concerted way to find out how we can make that fuel source a whole lot more environmentally friendly. Nuclear One up in Russellville, you're looking at a drilling rig for natural gas. I tried real hard around here for several months to get us to buy some natural gas buses for Central Arkansas Transit, and we came close, but we're going to even get closer, as I keep pecking on that door. I'd much rather, talking about national priority, I'd much rather, go up to Clinton, Arkansas, and pipe some gas down to run one of our vehicles than I would of buying a gallon or two of fuel, half of which comes from the Middle East, or offshore. Of course, you're looking at solar and wind. We all know about what is happening here in Little Rock with LS Glass Fiber. Energy independence is a national priority, and it needs to remain. And sometimes you get a little bit off track in debating whether or not global warming is occurring. I hate to waste time, because time's not here to waste. We need to talk about the realities, and certainly I believe in global warming, but the reality is independence is absolutely essential for the future of this country. Community involvement, that picture is about as fresh as it can be, but not any fresher than nut produce that's going to be on the shelves over there in our Argenta market. Planting trees. I mean, all the kinds of simple things that if we're just conscious of the choices, conscious of the information, that we can be a victor in the battleground for people's minds and how to be smart. We had a substation, just real quick, downtown on Main Street, and one Friday I was walking down in front of that substation, and they weren't going to be using it that weekend, and the air conditioner was on. And I couldn't get in there to turn the air conditioner off. So know what I did? I called Chief Bradley and I said, Chief, you get me a key and come on down here. I'm going to wait on you. I want you to turn off the air conditioner in that substation. And rest assured, that stuck with him. And I didn't have to call him anymore to turn that air conditioner system off. We are looking at the future, and what the future is a great future for this country. We can have a terrific quality of life, much better than the one we've had since World War II, when we started thinking, we'll say, out of the box and on the interstate. We need to come back to the kind of life that at least I have parts of my recollection in growing up. Now, why do we do it? It all connects. That 54.6 square miles is my battleground, and I intend to win that war. And those are three of the reasons that sort of choke me up, because they're the future for me, and all those three. Savannah is 7, and many of you have heard me talk about her. Isabella's 5, and that's my bud too. He's 1.5. Harper just showed up about 1.5 years ago in October. So thank y'all very much. We're going to win. Senator, I'm sorry. I get all talk about my grandchildren. I just lose my train of thought. One quick thing. Savannah picked up a penny when she was 3 years old in our crafts during Christmas, and she said, "Papa, look what I found." And I said, "Savannah, you want to keep that penny?" And she said, "Yeah." And I thought that she was so excited, so I slipped out about 5 or 6, 7, 8 $1 bills, and I said, "Savannah, that penny's not too much. You want some more?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how many do you want?" And she said, 2. And I thought, well, okay, because I had 7 or 8. I gave her 2, and then I started thinking, well, I got this. I said, "Savannah, Papa's got some more. What else has Papa got you'd like to have?" She looked at me real serious, and she said, "Papa, do you have a credit card?" We got to put a lot in the bank for those kids, and that's one of the things that I look over, and David Pryor put a lot in the bank for my generation, because I can remember he had a fish fry up in front of on the house side up in Washington when I worked for John McClellan as an intern, and that fish fry was we brought in seniors from all around the Northern Virginia area, the Washington area, Maryland, and that's because he had gone in, and we talk about, what is it, Executive in Hiding, that show that's on now. Well, he was a congressman in hiding, and he went into one of those nursing homes, and he spent some time in learning exactly what went on and what didn't go on. And so David Pryor took that, and seniors all around this country, and certainly in many respects this globe, are better off. And as now I'm in that generation, I want to underline our appreciation to a person whose contributions to Arkansas, I don't need to dwell anymore on time, and I think we all in this room, all those that are Arkansans, know that. So let me ask him to come to the microphone with applause and thanks for being a great Arkansan, and we appreciate it. Senator.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I heard yesterday, I was driving from Mountain Home to Little Rock late yesterday afternoon. I heard the most wonderful discussion on NPR. There was a woman being interviewed, and she is a worldwide expert on seniors and memory loss. And she called it brain default. And a while ago, I thought of you. You're not old enough for this yet, Patrick, but anyway. Patrick Henry Hayes, let me say this, Admiral Gunn and Phyllis and John Warner. Patrick Henry Hayes, when all of the scores are written, the good, bad, indifferent, and whatever, about all the public officials in our little state of Arkansas, no one is going to come out better as having served his people better than Patrick Henry Hayes, North Little Rock. You are a visionary, you are a progressive, Patrick Henry Hayes, and we all salute you, and we thank you for your years of service to your people and to our state. Let me just say that Nikolai DePippa, who presided a moment ago, he's here somewhere. Where are you, Nikolai? Anyway, he's a young man that I had the privilege of hiring when I was the dean, the inaugural dean here at the Clinton School. His father is the dean of the law school here. And I heard last May at the graduation, I was there. I was seated there on the podium, and Dean DePippa got up and he says, "Okay, let's talk about cell phones a minute." So everybody says, "Oh, we got to turn off." He said, "No, don't turn off your cell phones. Turn them on." I want everybody in this, several thousand people in the convention center, in the balconies and all over the place, graduates in their robes, gowns, whatever. Turn on your cell phones. So everybody picked up their cell phone, turned it on. He says, "Now dial one person in the next 60 seconds throughout this convention center who helped make this day possible and help give you graduates an honor and the opportunity to be a graduating senior in this law school graduating class. Thank someone." So I think today, and I love that story about Dean DePippa at the law school graduation. I think if I could pick up my little cell phone, which I can't operate most of the time, if I could dial someone and say thank you, it would be thank you to John Warner, my friend from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the man who served the Commonwealth of Virginia in the United States Senate longer than any other person. John Warner, in my opinion, has come to the very appropriate place to talk about public service, about some of the issues that we in our time and generation must face before it is too late. I thank the Pew Trust, the Pew Charitable Trust, for the effort and the resources that you have put forward in bringing this issue once again to the attention of the American people. And we thank John Warner for being the spokesman for this issue, for being able to go to the American people in events like this and say, "Folks, we have a problem. And we as a people, as Americans, we're smart enough and we're bold enough, we're creative enough, and we've got to find the resolve to solve this particular problem that unless we are very, very smart and wise, we're going to pass on not only to our, but future generations." John Warner, this great little Clinton school is very small by some respects, but I can tell you what it stands for. It stands for people coming together 2 or 3 times a week, sharing ideas, disagreeing sometime, but most important, of listening to one another. When I went to the Senate, one of the senators that I admired the most was Senator John Warner of Virginia. We didn't always agree on issues, but I'll tell you what, during that time, we always found it very possible to listen to one another. The toxicity was not there. The meanness was not there. And it was because there were people like John Warner who championed moderation and listening and understanding and seeing if we cannot solve some of these problems that lie before us. It is my great honor today to present to you the senator that I admired so much for 18 years that I had the privilege of serving with, who served his state of Virginia for 3 decades, Senator John Warner. John Warner. Come up here. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you.
I judge this stand was built for Bill Clinton. All the rest of us feel like we're down here. There are moments in everybody's life when you really are at a loss for words. I thank you, dear friend. I thank you from the bottom of my heart because you reflect on a period which is unquestionably one of the most memorable and happiest when working with you, your whole family, father, son, wives, and the institution that we knew and loved has changed dramatically. If I had the one word to describe this very able public servant, I would simply say civility. It's interesting, George Washington became very much interested in civility. His home, Mount Vernon, is just a few miles down the road from where I live, in a nice little house with my lovely wife and dog. Children are all grown up, grandchildren wander in and out. But I've often gone down there just to reflect and walk through his gardens. And he published a book, and I'm going to send it to you, Senator, on the 28 rules of civility. And they're very simple, and they're understandable. And you talked about your cell phone thing. I'm going to steal that story and make it my own, because I'm going to speak at a graduation very soon, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. But this is a small graduation of just a middle school where my grandson is departing from, fortunately. But I'm going to give each one of them a copy of George Washington's book, all 32 graduates, on civility. But you exemplified that then, now, and most importantly, you'll always be remembered for it. And I wish your son the best, with good fortune, your wife and your family. And I'll tell you a funny little story. I went out, we were with the Pew Foundation, Phyllis. We went out to visit my old friend and your old friend, John Glenn. John asked me to come out to his school, John Glenn School at Ohio University. And there he was, a towering man of strength, as strong as ever, and his lovely wife, Annie. And we had an audience about this size, you know, friends, and it was a very warm exchange, and we were getting along just fine until, in the course of the questions, and we're going to get to these questions and colloquies from you. You've had enough speakers, so I'm going to yield the floor to you momentarily. But this one person got up and in a very robust voice and began to talk about the inability of the Congress to get anything done, and how he was paying the salary of the members of Congress, and how his state and the nation needed things done. And he said, I'll tell you what the solution is. And he was very clever. He had a long pause. And then he repeated it. I'll tell you what the solution is. We're going to send John Glenn, John Warner back to the Senate. Well, my God. John Glenn's wife jumped up and said, no, he's not going back. No, he's not going back. So, spontaneously, that happened. But those are some of the wonderful things that I have experienced on this marvelous trip with our leader here, Phyllis Cutnell, and the Pew Foundation, which I'm privileged to work for, and our good friend Admiral Gunn. He represents the finest traditions of not just the United States Navy, but all the men and now many women who have privileged to serve in the uniform of this country. I started my career in I remember it very well, January of 1945, in the height of World War II. I was 17, and you could join your service of choice. And I kept begging my mother and father to go. And father had served in World War I in the trenches and highly decorated. He was a young captain, a doctor, a medical doctor. He said, no, I don't want you to go in the Army, because I spent 14 months in France in the trenches, and I saw one clean sheet the whole time, lived in mud the rest of the time. So he didn't want me to do that. So anyway, I went in the Navy. But that was the beginning of my public service, and I've had literally the good fortune of a lifetime of association with the men and women who proudly worn the uniform of our country. And that's what propelled me and the Admiral and many others to join in on this subject of the connection between energy and climate change and the security of our country. But I mentioned my father, and he was, as I say, a medical doctor. And he used to say to me, I remember this so well, I told our mutual friend Dale Bumpers his story one time, and oh, I love Dale Bumpers. Now, you know, it's funny. I had as many, if not more, friends on the Democratic side than I had on the Republican side. It was Dale and you and Sam Nunn and John Culver. I could go on, and what grand times we had. But I used to say to Dale, now Dale was known as quite a talker. Some of you have heard him, I suppose, have you not? I remember the time we were on the debate at 4 o'clock in the morning on the Senate, arguing over a battle in the Civil War and which side had won the battle. And senators sleepily got up out of their offices and all came down to the floor. But I told him this story. I said, Senator Bumpers, you don't learn anything while you're talking. It's only while you're listening. So, folks, it's time for the speech makers to settle back and let's have a listening session. Because, see this wonderful statement here? I was privileged to know President Clinton quite well. I was chairman of the committee or ranking member. I went in and out so many times, either one seat or the other. Ranking's the minority senior person. But we'd go down. He'd have us down to the White House. And he acknowledged he wasn't, the foremost expert on national security, but he wanted to learn. And his idea of learning was to listen. And he'd bring the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. I was then chairman or ranking of the Armed Services Committee of the Senate. He'd bring my counterparts in the House of Representatives and some of the appropriators who did the defense appropriations. You're familiar with all those very well. And he didn't sit down in his office, and we didn't sit in the cabinet room. He said, come on, let's go upstairs in the family quarters. I can relax better up there. And the press can't look through the window and see me up there, and I want to relax. And we'd sit there and we would talk. And this is the tough times of the Balkans problems, you know. When there was a hot war going on and the question of, to the extent our wonderful men and women of the armed forces were involved in that, he was a good listener and a good learner, and I think one of his greatest accomplishments is to establish this school. And when I made the decision to not seek a sixth term in the Senate, although I'll tell you, with modesty, the Democrats told me they would not run anybody against me if I ran. And the Republicans, forget it, I could roll them over in a minute. All those old hard knockers and soft knockers and all of them. But it really, I took the campaign funds that I had, a small amount, and gave it to 2 universities which trained me, Washington and Lee and the University of Virginia. And I set up scholarships with this exact name, public service. But I made one stipulation, Senator, you'd be interested in this. I said, the winner has to be a man or a woman that commits at some point in their life to serve some period of public service. But it's not an appointment by a governor. It's got to be, Mr. Mayor, what you have done, and that is to go out and shake hands with people, and the toughest thing is to look them in the eye and say, can I have your vote? And that gets a little advantage on them, but I've had them said many a time, no way, Senator, you're going to get my vote. And I said, well, I'll put you in the undecided column. So let us talk about it, because the Congress of the United States is only going to react if you, individually and collectively, urge them to do so. So first and foremost, you've got to make up your mind as to where you stand on these issues. And then secondly, am I going to become an activist and reach out could be your state representatives or your federal, and express my views to that individual and get this thing going. The Pew Foundation, as Ms. Cutno can tell you, just did a study of the 20 leading industrial nations of the world. And of those nations, which were performing and building, most importantly, things that related to climate change and energy efficiency and conservation. And it was China. It was Denmark that leads in wind energy. It was Germany, which leads in solar voltaic cells. And on it goes. And the United States wasn't in the top 5, the top 10. We were down, way down here. Because each nation that did have a framework of laws had then incentivized their industry, their fuel suppliers, their energy suppliers, and they were moving ahead. So it's only going to happen if you take charge individually and collectively in towns and villages and cities all across America. So with that, I will yield the floor, at which time I hope you get up and shake your hand and seek recognition and give us your views. Amen. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Ready?
Hi, my name is Kevin Tran. I'm a doctoral student from University of Phoenix, and my research, my dissertation is also in renewable energy.
Can you raise your voice?
Yes. My question is, we have talked a lot about renewable energy and various options of renewable energy. When is the appropriate time that we have a study group or initiative to do a study on what the renewable energy we need to address or start implementing? And
I think I generally understand your question, and that is the emphasis on renewable energy sources. The basic definition of renewable energy is that it expends no hydrocarbons. It is the wind. It is the sun. It is the heat in the earth, the geothermal, and there are other forms of it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are, as a nation, beginning to rely on those sources more and more, but it's a very small fraction of the total consumption of our energy, and it's quite expensive. I would hope Phyllis could tell us of a story, you could stand and tell it momentarily, Phyllis, of how a large wind farm, which was going to be constructed, has suddenly been stopped by federal court action. So it's not a simple thing to suddenly rely on the wind. First place, often the wind blows in those geographic areas of the country that are most remote from the grid. So you've got to capture the wind power, put it in the form of electricity, and then get it to the grid. And there's a great deal of what we call attenuation or loss getting to the grid. So we, as a nation, should seek to continue to add those sources of energy when they economically can be done, but it will not eventually be the main solution. Would someone care to add to that?
You know, the only thing I'd add is all the above. I mean, you know, you've got different parts of the country, different geographic assets and liabilities, and every one of those technologies is one that ought to be explored as you adapt whichever might be the best. I know wind, in terms of Arkansas, it doesn't appear to be that beneficial, but You've got solar. Germany, I think, is one of the leading solar states, as the senator, or countries, as the senator indicated, and its climate in terms of cloud cover is not much better than, in fact, probably worse than ours. And then you've got, different opportunities that, that you have to look at in terms of technology from battery, because storage is a big aspect of the difficulty in trying to deal with renewables. So a variety of answers. All the above really is the proper one, I'd say.
And as strong as we're trying to do it, sometimes we get stopped in our tracks. Stand up and tell them quickly that story that's in the press here in the last 48 hours.
Well, it was just in the newspaper today. I think there are challenges with getting renewables up and running, certainly, and this was just a story about the Department of Defense challenging a large wind farm in Oregon, or at least wanting to take a second look at it because it would interfere with the Air Force, some Air Force bases there. But that being said, to renewable energy, the cost of renewable energy is coming down, and the clean energy economy is growing globally and here in the United States. I mean, we've seen the clean energy economy grow by 230%, even at a time when the global economy has kind of decreased. So I think it represents an unbelievable opportunity. And as costs come down, and you see wind is obviously a mature sector, and where solar, we had 7 times the investments in solar that we had just 5 years ago. It needs to be an opportunity that we should seize, recognizing that there are going to be challenges in deploying it.
We may come back, but we want to listen to others out here. Come on, folks, it's very quiet. Yes, ma'am.
Offshore drilling going to help us along. We started, I understand that the President released approval to offshore drill in Florida.
Right, and let me say that I put that piece of legislation in 3 consecutive years before I stepped down. For Virginia, and we worded it very carefully, the proposed legislation, that we'd go out at a minimum of 50 miles. That is, you could not see it from shore, and to help minimize some pollutant problems if it got near the shore. And then you could drill for gas. We put it in for gas. Technology today is proven that we can extract that type of natural energy from our own territorial waters, and if the people of Virginia had a vote on it, then we'll do it. And the President, I think very wisely, has come along, and what he's done is one key word. He has authorized the exploration, which means that we should energize those companies to go out and determine through exploration, is it or is it not there, be it gas or oil, and can they or can they not, at that level, wherever it is, the geologists have wonderful means of determining it now, what sort of rig would be necessary and how safe would that rig be. So to the President's credit, he has taken step 1. But again, the legislation eventually, each state would have to speak and approve it. Yes, it will help. Every bit of energy that we're able to take from our own resources safely, environmentally extracted, lessens the need to go overseas and find a source to ship it here.
I guess on that point, there was a lot of talk about natural gas being that bridge from the foreign dependent to something that we could make here. But now that petroleum has come down in price per barrel, that natural gas has kind of taken the back burners, even in Arkansas. So what's the future of natural gas in this equation?
Yeah, I think very quickly, I don't think anybody, of course the points have been made, is that petroleum is a finite resource, and you've got India and China that are moving up in greater numbers and having the ability to try to, we'll say, achieve some of the things that we have in terms of energy. And they're going after some of the same things that we have in terms of foreign oil. And it's just, I mean, the basic economics seem to me to be impossible to refute. But at some point, petroleum is going to start accelerating again, and we're going to have to be more prepared perhaps than we are now to look at alternate sources of energy, and that's one of the reasons that I know I worked real hard, to try to get us to convert with some of the ARA funding to some natural gas buses. So those are the things that we're going to have to look at. And I just want to quickly, if I could, we've got one of our council members here, Jimmy Phillips, and I wanted to the senator talked about how we're going to be able to move forward, and of course I refer to cities, but when we voted to go north in expanding our trolley system, there was a wave of emails that said, you're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, we like our single passenger car. Now they didn't quite say that, but essentially that's the kind of responses that we get, and talk about voters, and talk about what we can do. Those of us on the local level and the state level and the national level that are in office need to have folks like you who are have taken the time to come to evenings like this and see the future and what kind of issues it have to do, because Jimmy and I need cover when we make those decisions. So self-preservation is always a partial goal, but also allies in terms of political direction in this country is very important.
Quickly, a technical thing on natural gas, two things. One, it contributes greenhouse gases, but at only about 50% of the level of coal. So with natural gas, you create a significant reduction of greenhouse gases. And secondly, technology has been very successful in determining formations, particularly now on the eastern part of the United States, through heavy rock, that it can be extracted. So the technology for extraction has improved dramatically, and soon we'll be going into some of the more difficult regions which we thought was unattainable in years past, and therein rests some of the biggest gas reserves that we have in the United States.
Adam.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name's Adam Moreland. I'm a student at the Clinton School. I'm from West Virginia originally, and I have this dream of, we keep hearing about creating all these green jobs, and I have this dream of taking those green jobs and setting them up in West Virginia and Kentucky and coal country, and taking those miners and moving them over and kind of getting getting people out of the coal mine, getting us off of our reliance on coal and into more renewable energies. But I don't hear anything about those green jobs being created. Could you kind of maybe speak on where we are in that process of getting those green jobs going?
You want to try that?
Toss that one over to the sailor. In the 1960s, in the northeast region of France, the resources began to peter out, the coal resources in northeastern France, and the jobs went with them. The French government, whether you agree with their general approach to matters or not, made a decision to retrain the people who were now unemployed in information technology and systems engineering. And you would have thought, wow, that's a bridge too far. But the fact is that the people who'd grown up in the coal region were limited in what they had for educational opportunities, and when offered state support, were willing and able to take advantage of it. It turned out to be very important, and it rocketed France to the head of the pack in terms of information technology in what became the European Union. So what's the lesson there? I think the lesson is that there is a role for government at federal, state, and local level in accounting for the distortions that take place as a natural consequence of the changes in the way we have our resources and can use our resources. I'm not advocating the sort of command approach that the French government took. It was comfortable for them. It would not be that comfortable for us. But the alignment of incentives is extraordinarily important, and we've talked about that on the road in a number of of venues. We have episodic interest at the federal level, for sure, in getting the incentives right to attract industry, to create jobs, to encourage technological development. But it's only episodic. The enthusiasm fades, new issues come to the fore, and suddenly we're not nearly as committed as we should be, in my view, over the long haul. And back to the French example, the French did this over a period of 25 years. They decided that was the right policy. They stayed with it. They did it long enough that they began to realize the dividends associated with it. And it turned out a very important policy set of choices for France. Things like that need to be done in this country. British Petroleum, now BP, the energy company it calls itself, built a factory to produce machinery for renewable energy in Maryland. Starting 5 years ago, they completed it a year ago, put the machinery in place for the manufacturing, and now we're in the process of shipping all the machinery to China. This is a year later, after it was open. They're shipping the machinery to China. The 300 jobs that were created in Maryland have gone away, and the facility, honest to goodness, is going to be bulldozed. Now, I don't know the details I don't know what the decision-making process was in BP, but you got to believe there were powerful incentives not to be in Maryland for them to take a brand new plant, disassemble it, ship it overseas, and bulldoze it. Whatever the incentive set is that BP was responding to, it's not the right one. And we need to work real hard to make sure the incentives are right.
Let me just hit one quick postscript on that. I know I had a chance last October to go ride the Spanish high-speed rail system, and from Madrid to Barcelona, about 350 miles, and we covered it in about 3 hours, 186 miles an hour. And there's absolutely no way, as you look to the future, we talked about population, that the greatest public work project that ever was done, and one of the most beneficial in terms of the economy of this country, was our interstate system. And it's matured, and we're not going to be able to build another one of an equal, we'll say, stature in terms of handling the economic needs of the country in the future. Senator Warner talked about, obviously, national security. That's what President Eisenhower sold that on, was national security. So without a doubt, we're going to have to look to the future, and they can't build a new high-speed rail system or an integrated transportation system, which it needs to be overseas. That's got to be done here, and it's got to be done with significant public investment. So, there are a lot of things that we can do in transitioning from a fossil-based economy to a more environmentally friendly economy, and all those jobs, in fact, the vast majority of them have to be here. They talked about one thing that was in the paper not too long ago, that talking about building some of the equipment for the $8 billion that Obama invested in, or at least is directed toward the stimulus funding in high-speed rail. There are two plants here in Arkansas that may very well produce some of the cars that stimulus money may help fund. So those are jobs, and they're going to be good jobs for the future.